Serious, what is the most terrifying thing to happen to you in a well-lit and populated place? I was working a construction job a while back and I was told to wait on the ground floor for someone. I bent down to ready my boots and a pallet full of mixing cement comes crashing down where I was just standing. I clearly remember the foreman saying I would have been stone cold dead if my shoes were tied. Broad daylight. Nobody reported the accident. OSHA was different back then. If anyone has seen the movie Grand Canyon, you'll know how I felt. I was in a local swimming pool and a friend mentioned how he thought I could fit into the storage locker. I jumped in and he locked it behind me. I learned a few things that day. 1. I can indeed fit into some storage lockers. 2. This person was not my friend. 3. Strangers won't help you if your friend says you are fine even if you are crying for help. 4. Putting the vents at the bottom of a locker is real dumb. I was 10 or maybe 12 years old. My mom took me to the mall so she could go to the Target. There was a baseball card comic book store right next to the Target and while she shopped I got to go look at the collectibles. While I was looking at the cards in the case, a guy came in. He looked around for a minute, then approached me and asked if I liked baseball cards. I said that I did and he said he had a Babe Ruth card in his van and asked if I would like to see it. We were right at the counter and the clerk was right there, but I got a real creepy vibe from this guy. I said no and left the store to go back to Target and find my mom. I looked behind me as I walked into Target and, sure enough, he was following me. I was starting to get a little scared, so I turned into the women's underwear aisle. Thinking he wouldn't follow me, he kept after me until I finally found my mom. I never told her about it because I didn't want to scare her. At the time I thought maybe he wanted to steal my $10 but now I'm pretty sure he wanted more than $10. TLDR. Creepster tried to get me in the mall. When I was really young, a guy stopped me when I was leaving school and asked if I liked PlayStation and Nintendo. I told him I did, and that I really liked Final Fantasy and he said what a coincidence. I have that with a TV in my van. Wanna come play? I told him I had to ask my mom first, and to stay here. I ran home and called my mom to ask, and she told me to lock the door, get in the basement, and don't open the door for anyone. She explained what was happening to me when she got home and once I knew, I was pretty freaked out. You're a good kid wanting to ask your mom. Crazy scary what could have been if you didn't. I was followed. It wasn't super populated where he saw me, but it was midday, the edges of the city center, and we definitely weren't the only people around. This guy started talking to me and getting too close, telling me that I was very beautiful and asking how old I was, a very young looking 18. I told him I was 16, I think, in the hope that he would think that was creepy and go away. This guy was nearly middle-aged. It was just kind of usual creepy to start with, until it became obvious that he was following me beyond the point of just being a weird guy making conversation with a passerby. I told him I had to go, and flat out walked into traffic to get away from him, and he literally yelled I'm following you after me, and ran up to me once the cars had passed. Eventually I caught up with a bigger crowd of people, refusing to speak to him anymore. He was stupid enough to try and take hold of me. I yelled, and people turned around, so he ended up running away. I also had someone yell I hope you get debauched at me and my friends in London, and nobody turned around there. Londoners see more crap, I imagine. A few years ago I was at a bowling center on a busy day. When we were about to leave we heard a big bang. A man had thrown the heaviest bowling ball on a woman's head. Later I read that he did it on purpose and the woman had severe brain damage and was lucky to be alive. The man got sentenced to 18 months in prison. Someone noted to me that I forgot forced psychological evaluation and the 7.5k reimbursement he had to pay. Holy crap, 18 months is child's play for that type of crime. An addict wanted money from me downtown, but I literally had nothing but my clothes on me. So I said sorry man, all out. Dude lumbers towards me slowly, pushes me over, and stabbed me in the thigh with a Swiss Army knife. I booked it to the hospital for stitches. Didn't hurt until I actually looked at it. Adrenaline didn't stop pumping for a very long time. Anyone asking why didn't you run if he was lumbering towards you? Hey, I was 13. He was a full-grown adult. I had a bad haircut. He pulled a knife on me. I froze in fear. I bet you slept super well when the adrenaline wore off. That crap is exhausting. Many years ago, I was just about to walk into the restaurant where I was the assistant manager when I was approached by this huge guy who was all smiles and generally gave across this body language of being friendly. Is a sorry but I need to ask you something kinda way. Next thing I knew, he was screaming at me about some friend I hadn't seen in a while. Turns out my friend had stolen some wheel off this dodgy guy, and my name had come up for some reason. Right there in the middle of a busy road in a busy city, he pulled out a Stanley knife and told me he was going to cut my throat with it if I didn't give him his £350 right there. I still don't remember exactly what I said to him, but he left, told me he was going to kill me if he ever saw me again, and I went into work. When I was 12 years old, I was beaten up in a crowded bus station at rush hour by a boy several years older than me for absolutely no reason whatsoever. It was a completely unprovoked attack and I was trapped against a one-way door. The adults standing around waiting for their buses to go home from work did absolutely nothing to help me or to stop me from being attacked. I accompanied my dad to the hospital while he was undergoing a routine procedure. They put him under for an hour to do a laryngoscopy. I kicked back in the cheery, well-lit lobby with my tablet, playing a game. I was engrossed in the game, but about 10 minutes later I realized the place had gone eerily silent. I looked up and there were no nurses or staff anywhere. I was the only person in what had been a room with a half dozen people going back and forth. Looking around, I suddenly noticed a red light flashing over one of the doors. My heart dropped out of my chest. My hands went icy and numb. I started counting the doors. The red light was flashing over my dad's door. I walked slowly down the hallway, trying not to make a sound. I didn't want to disturb anyone. I didn't want to miss any sounds. I didn't want to know what was happening in the room I was walking toward. I felt like a scared 7-year-old. A nurse came out and he grabbed me on the shoulder. "Hey," he said casually, "we are working with your dad right now, but I need to have you wait in the lobby right now." Okay, what's going on? My voice was small and timid and high and I hated hearing it, hated feeling helpless. "Oh, we'll be out to talk to you in just a second. Sorry, but I gotta go." He slipped back into the room and the unearthly silence came back. So, I walked back to the lobby and sat down. A chaplain came by a bit later, as I was sitting motionless. My dad had a heart attack while under. He went into a coma, but they got his heart beating again. As I went in to see him, nurses and doctors filtered out of the room. Blood spatters on the sheets and floor. My dad quiet, wired into a half dozen machines. About 15 minutes later, when my mom arrived to answer my urgent texts and calls, the lobby had a couple of families and they're chatting happily, and the staff was back to its business. We pulled his life support 4 days later, after learning he was irrevocably brain dead. The world can change so fast. Your life can get turned upside down. Your life can end. And for the people around you, it can just be another day. They go on without even noticing the pain inside you. That was the moment in my life this truth was most starkly plain. Nothing has ever been more terrifying. It was well lit and populated as it was my workplace. I was a pourer in a foundry at the time. Due to a mistake in the metal, it had to be put back into the furnace instead of being poured. A job that is done by using a crane to take the ladle, big bucket full of molten metal, back to the furnace. The ladle is then manually rolled over and the metal poured back into the furnace. I was the lucky guy to roll it in, and whilst rolling it the crane driver made a mistake and moved the ladle out of position. This resulted in a wave of 1600 C, 3000 F, metal flying toward me like water off a spoon in the sink. Due to the light coming from the molten metal I couldn't gauge the depth of the wave at the time, but looked down to see nothing but orange light surrounding me from the waist up. This lasted a moment at most, but in that moment every possible injury that could come from that crossed my mind. No injury came of that. Like a spoon in the sink the wave was very thin and my gear was good enough. But I was genuinely terrified then. Anyone having difficulty picturing this? The wave of metal that hit me was splashed back off the top rim of the furnace. I was on a stand. About half of my body was above the rim of the furnace. When rolling the metal in, it comes out of the top of the bucket, and the crane operator managed to clip the furnace ventilation. This turned the ladle and caused it to go everywhere. What hit me was more like a sheet of metal that happened to be molten. Seeing it hit me, I was unable to tell how deep the actual wave was, so from my perspective, I had a sheet of molten metal around my waist that was unknown depth and incredibly hot. As I was the one turning the ladle in, I flicked down the lock on the turning wheel and quickly turned to jump down from the stand. This all happened very quickly. There was a distinct line and some metal splash on the front of my jacket where the wave had come into contact with me. Once I determined I was okay, I put the gear back on and finished the rollover. Jesus H. Christ, that is the most terrifying thing in the thread. I'm not sure it was the most terrifying thing that happened to me, but it was the most terrifying thing that happened to me at that point in my life. I was about 11, in Cape Town, South Africa, visiting family. My parents were walking in front of me, and I was walking with my little cousin directly behind them. We were in a shopping mall, Tyger Valley Center for any South Africans out there. Anyway, I think my parents had stopped to get some money out of an ATM, and my cousin were just being silly, as you do at that age. This guy, maybe in his mid-20s, sat across from us on a bench, pointed at us, then my parents, and then dragged his finger along his neck. He then pulled open his jacket and pulled a gun out of a pocket. I don't know if that was a real gun, and I didn't care to find out. I told my parents immediately, and we kind of circulated the security personnel before eventually leaving. Was a bit of an uncomfortable situation. Friend of my housemate was nearly mugged in SAR. These two guys somehow talked the, not very bright, friend into their hotel room and told him to hand over his money. He didn't really get what was going on and just replied no thanks, and left. They were so shocked they just let him leave. Was taking my kids for a walk in the park near our apartment once when a guy and a woman came out of the tree line suddenly, and the guy said to give him my wallet and anything else in my pockets. He had some weird screwdriver knife thing, and I pushed my daughter, my eldest child, behind me. I was going to do the same for my son, but the woman grabbed his other arm for some reason and my heart felt like it was going to explode for some reason. I suddenly forgot about self-preservation and jumped forwards and broke the woman's nose. I felt a sharp pain under my ribs and looked to see that the man had just shanked me, but at this point 2 other guys who had been jogging were running up and shouting. The police that patrolled the park showed up not long after that. I was sitting and trying not to bleed to death. The man had ran off and his screwdriver was still in me. The woman was on the ground crying and shouting because I had also knocked the top front of her teeth loose out. The 2 joggers were originally asking the woman if I was the assaulter, but the situation cleared up soon. I got taken to the hospital and questioned about the incident. There was a while when it looked like I was going to be charged with battery for the woman, since it turns out she actually had a decently well-off family, was just an addict. They tried to sue me, but it was thrown out and she was sentenced for attempted kidnapping. I had a tube in my chest for 2 weeks after my surgery to remove the shank, but it all cleared up after that. Just glad my kids are safe. I am male. Sorry for not clarifying. The mother of my children passed away several years ago. They tried to sue me. What a bunch of lowlifes. I'm glad you won. I was 18 or 19 and picking up a prescription at the pharmacy. While I was waiting in line, a man, who I guess was waiting in line as well, started taking pictures of my feet with his cell phone. He wasn't even trying to be subtle, just kind of bent over and aimed his phone at my feet. I moved a few feet away and he just followed me. The pharmacist saw the whole thing and mouthed, "Do you know him?" I shook my head with my eyes wide, grabbed my prescription and bolted away from the counter. I hid in the store until I saw him leave and drive off because I was afraid he might follow me. Maybe not terrifying, but definitely unnerving and creepy. Still creeps me out thinking about it. Now that's definitely not okay. I always want to say if I were in that situation I'd vocalize it so everyone would hear. Stop taking pictures of my feet. I don't know you, but I know if it actually happened I'd probably freak out and just run away. My dog and I are stopped at a crosswalk and he barks and scares this woman. As soon as he barked, the walk dude came up to cross, but the lady started yelling about my needing to control my dog and she pulled out a taser. I'm just trying to get across the street and she starts making even a bigger scene saying how she's going to shock me. My dog is barking at the crazy lady. We are standing in the street now, at a busy intersection, and I thought to myself, I'm about to get tased in front of all these people. A couple of years ago I was jogging in the center of my town as usual when I realized I was being followed by some guy I had never seen. He kept trying to talk to me, and at some point he grabbed me from behind and went full diddler on me. I shook free, then started screaming, knocking on the hood of a car passing by. He ran away, never to be found. I couldn't jog for over a year. I resumed jogging after a year or so, by the way. Would also like to remind everyone in a situation of possible assault to run away. Make a lot of noise. Run towards houses, people, cars so you can get someone's attention and be helped. Scream fire if need be. People may ignore calls for help but usually respond in case of fire. And, lastly, report the incident to the authorities. I was on my high school's cross-country team and we used to run in sports bras in the park across from our school. The boys ran without shirts on, so it was never an issue. Then one day one of my teammates was off on her own and a guy basically jumped out of the trees and grabbed her and tried to feel her up. He shoved his hands down her chest. Some people are just pigs. As a young teenager, in the early 90s, I went to a slightly low-rent amusement park on a school trip. They had some rides, nothing like the huge ones at premium parks, but there was a reasonable looking roller coaster with a full loop and a corkscrew style part. I'm sure there's a bunch of terminology I don't know about rides, so don't mind me. My group of friends all decided to give it a try. I'd never been on one, so while I was a bit scared, it looked pretty cool, so why not? Our group all get on at the same time, talking and bullshitting each other in the way excited kids do. The cars start moving backwards up a slope. Once it gets to near the top, the cars would release and go down the track. We're still moving up the slope and I look across at my friend and his restraint is down. Mine isn't. Oh crap. I panic naturally. We must be over 100 feet up, on a 45 feet slope. There's nothing I can do to get off and it can't be too long until the cars will drop. I grab my restraint and pull it down across my chest. I think it locks into place, but now the cars drop. I can't do a freaking thing except hold on. The speed pins me into my seat, and while I don't think I'd come out in the corkscrew part, here comes the loop. As I pass the top of the loop I feel the cars slow just a little. My knuckles must have been transparent. They were gripping the edge of my seat so hard in a vain attempt to hold my upside down butt in the seat. We exit the loop and go up another slope to then reverse the track direction. As it slows I can just about prise my hands from the seat to check my restraint and it felt secure. Naturally I didn't quite trust it and I gripped my seat all the way back through the course. I got off the ride in a daze and never said a thing about it. Looking back I didn't know crap about roller coasters. I think I assumed restraints would come down and lock automatically. There was a ride operator, a bored, tired kid not much older than I was, who probably should have walked down the cars before they left to check stupid kids like me were locked in and just missed me. Walking back from lunch to my office. I work in an urban area but it usually is safe to walk. From the corner of my eye I thought I saw someone following me. Didn't think too much about it but picked up my pace a little. I had to stop at the crosswalk and the person behind me catches up and I feel something on my back and he tells me to make a left turn. I turn into the next street and he asks me for all the money in my wallet. I gave it to him and he bolted past me. It had to be no later than 1 PM and I got mugged right in broad daylight. I'm a 20-something lady. I was heading home from the gym, tired, dressed elegantly, on my way from work, along a large, well-lit street, about a block from my house. A man first tried to catch my attention and then to grab me and pull towards the bushes on one side of the sidewalk, having already partly removed his pants. I screamed bloody murder and ran home. After calling the police and describing the attacker, they asked what I was wearing. I was going to get mad, but it turned out he matched the description of a local pedophile suspect that preys on young girls from the nearby school. I was wearing a rather girly navy blue skirt with a white shirt that day. He was never arrested. I was a senior in high school and was dropping my girlfriend off at her house. She lived in a pretty ghetto area, and I was from the nice part of town. As I was saying bye to her, her neighbor from across the street walked over to us and started yelling at me. This guy was our age and I guess she knew him as well. He started yelling at me for some reason, So I started walking towards him to do who knows what, when he said, "I have a gun and I'm gonna fricking kill you." At this I just stop in my tracks trying to determine if he's being serious. And then my girlfriend stalks past me, walks up to him and slaps him in the face as hard as she can and yells, "Get the frick out of here, Junior, and go home." I stood there thinking, holy crap, she just owned that guy. That was 15 years ago and we're now expecting our third kid. You have a great woman and that one. Recently went to Dolphin Cove to take care of my number one bucket list item, swim with sharks. I went with my best friend. Her and I are in our 40s and cute enough in our own right. Our shark trainer flirted with us but we thought nothing of it. Once we were in the water, we had to sit on a bench. He maneuvered a shark on our lap. Part of the program was the trainer guiding our hands to feel the shark. He put both of our hands on his very erect dong. We again kind of blew it off thinking it was an accident. Then he told us to spread our legs so we could hold and balance the shark on our legs. He slid his hand up our thighs and got his fingers under both of our bottoms before we stopped him. We both felt violated and it ruined my very top bucket list item experience for me. It horrifies and frightens me to think of how often he's done that with other women and kids. That is not the direction I thought that story was heading when you mentioned swimming with sharks. A few things come to mind but this is the biggest one for me. A few years ago I was at the local mall, outside waiting for my mom to get there. I see her car pull up, and she turns around and goes to park. Parking is accomplished without incident. She's maybe 50 feet away from me. She gets out of the car, and some car drives up into that row of parking about 10 seconds after she finishes parking. This guy, maybe 45, gets out of his car and starts yelling at my mom for stealing his parking, even though he wasn't anywhere near her when she was parking, calling her some nasty crap, and says that if this were his country that she'd be dead for crossing a man. Anyways, my mom had parked fair and square. After he starts throwing this crap at her, his relative gets out and also starts yelling at her. I'm a large person, 6'1". 230 pounds and I have a lot of muscle but some extra chub too cause I'm too lazy to diet perfectly and my wife likes it. That'll be my excuse. But I hate fighting and violence. Regardless, I run towards them and my mind goes into warrior mode. This guy was getting uncomfortably close to my mom, so I bark some obscene stuff at him and act like a caveman in heat fighting a saber-tooth and the guy actually screamed like a child and fell backwards over his car and begs me not to cut him. I didn't even have a knife or anything on me. I tell him that respecting women is both important and honorable and asked him to apologize. And then he drove off. Adrenaline was going crazy and my heart was pounding but my mommy dearest is safe and hopefully Dick would learned his lesson. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.